The Disability Resource Center proudly presents Haben Girma, Global Inclusion Leader, UC Santa Cruz.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm George Blumenthal. I'm the Chancellor of UCSC, and I'm really delighted to see all of you here today. And really some of the enthusiasm I've seen among some of the participants. I think these are really outstanding displays, and I've already learned a lot just by going through a few of them. So if you haven't had a chance to, I encourage you to do that. What a great effort. Building allies for inclusion. This event and the ability exhibit speak to what we value here at UC Santa Cruz, breaking down barriers and increasing opportunities for everybody. It's central to our principles of community. And along those lines, I want to be sure that we've all heard that our new campus diversity officer for staff and students, Linda Schultz, is now on board and has joined us here today. Linda, could you please stand up? The Disability Resource Center is on the frontiers helping students with disabilities. The DRC last year served 1,600 students at UC Santa Cruz. That's 10% of our undergraduate students. The vast majority of those students needed exam accommodations, a quiet room, more time to do the exam. But housing accommodations are also in high demand. Housing is a bigger issue now that we've converted so many doubles into triples on campus. Students have a range of needs. Some have physical disabilities that impact their mobility, their vision, or their ability to hear. Some are coping with learning differences or mental health issues like anxiety, depression, or even PTSD. And some are on the autism spectrum. The DRC is busier than ever. 1,600 students last year is double the number of students that were served just 3 years earlier. These numbers reflect greater awareness and a growing willingness of students to reach out for the support to which they are entitled. This is a good thing, and we are destigmatizing disability and accommodation on this campus. The DRC has done terrific work reaching out and building partnerships across the campus. Students were featured on posters across campus, part of the powerful public awareness campaign that is a part of reducing the stigma. And I want to make one thing absolutely clear today. We are legally mandated to provide accommodations, but our commitment stems from something far deeper than that. This is an issue of social justice. Some issues of access and inclusion are pretty apparent to us today. Well, an example might be curb cuts. The social justice model helps us see that it's often our environment that causes the disability. Cut the curb, and the world opens up to people in wheelchairs. And the same is true of the classroom. Exams are a critical feature for students, but there's a whole landscape of support the faculty can provide with really minimal effort that makes a world of difference to the students. The DRC partnership with the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning has come up with 5 tips. 5 tips for a more inclusive campus course design. Things like using a microphone, making sure videos have captions, working with the DRC to convert print documents into accessible formats like Braille. Census Access is a web tool that converts documents into electronic formats. And on this campus, it is still underutilized. Similarly, the DRC converts textbooks into files that are accessible for students with print and reading disabilities and those who are blind. Last quarter, they managed more than 1,300 conversion projects. And if faculty would just post their lists months earlier, months before the class, the DRC can have accessible documents ready for the students on the first day of class. These are pretty simple steps that make such a difference for our students. It's a matter of awareness, and then it's a matter of action. We know from the Campus Climate Survey that about 20% of our students have some type of disability. And the DRC is serving about 10% of our students. So we know that the work isn't yet done. I want to thank the DRC for the work and for their leadership and for their support of this event, the Ability Exhibit. And special thanks go to Catherine Green, the Assistant Director of Housing Services, and to Ricky Carr from the Staff Diversity Group, who collaborated with the DRC to bring you this event, and all of the co-sponsors listed on the mastering materials I want to thank as well. And now, it's really a pleasure to introduce Rick Gumash. He's the director of the Disability Research Center. He's been on this campus since 2013. He's been the director since 2015. Rick and his 8 colleagues and 150 student workers are dedicated to providing the accommodations our students need. Please join me in welcoming Rick.
They shake hands. Rick steps behind the lectern and speaks into the raised microphone.
Thank you, Chancellor Blumenthal, for your introduction and your commitment to equal educational access. The mission of the Disability Resource Center is to ensure equal educational access to the programs of UCSD. And this is a lofty mission. And we can't do it alone as our unit. It's a campus responsibility. But I consider UC Santa Cruz to be a leader in inclusive education. So thank you for your commitment to equal educational access. Today's program would not be possible without the collaborative work of our sponsors and our planning committee. So I'd like to quickly name our sponsors. The Student Fee Advisory Committee, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, University Town Center in the Village, Colleges, Housing, and Educational Services, the Staff Diversity Group, the Office of the Chancellor at EVC, and Kresge College. I'd also like to thank my division for the support that we've received for bringing this event and for their work in equal educational access, the Division of Student Success. So finally, the Planning Committee, if I could have you wave, we have Catherine Green. Here is Vicki Carr. There she is. And we had also some contributions from Donnie Smith from Colleges, Housing, and Educational Services, Diversity and Inclusion Programs. And then my staff, Abigail Katz and Jody Bruner, were also involved. So today our speaker will show how we can eliminate many barriers to equal access and why it's critical to the future of educational programming. My challenge to you today is to think about how you can be a champion of change, opening doors of equal access for people with disabilities. The future is ours to shape. So let's include all members of our community. And now I'm going to introduce our speaker is student leader Rosa Malero from the Accessibility Leadership Internship Program. Please help me welcome her.
Hi everyone. Before I do that, I'd like to let you know that the Accessibility Leadership Internship Program is a student-run program based out of DRC, and our goals are to create a more inclusive campus for students with disability, and just kind of destigmatize disability and make more students feel comfortable here. So I would like to introduce to you my new friend and alum to my high school, as well as a White House Champion of Change, Haben Girma. An internationally acclaimed inclusion leader, Haben has earned recognition as a White House Champion of Change, Forbes 30 Under 30 leader, and BBC Woman of Africa hero. The first deaf-blind person to graduate from Harvard Law School, Haben champions equal access to information for people with disabilities. She travels the world teaching organizations to design digital services and develop policies that ensure future opportunities for everyone. She has presented at Apple, Google, and the White House. Haben has been honored by President Barack Obama, President Bill Clinton, and many others. Please help me in welcoming Inclusion Champion of Change, Haben Girma.
Haben walks a few steps from a desk to the center of the stage. Her service dog lies beside her chair. A huge screen hangs behind her.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everyone, for coming here to talk about inclusion. My name is Haben Girma. The name Haben comes from Eritrea, a small African country. Ethiopia is just to the south, and to the north is the Red Sea. My brother was born in Eritrea, and when my grandmother tried to take him to school, they told her deaf-blind children can't go to school. She took him to the Eritrean school for the blind, and they said, sorry, he's deaf. We can't teach deaf kids. Then she tried taking him to the school for the deaf, and they said, sorry, he's blind. We don't teach blind kids. My family then moved to the United States, to the San Francisco Bay Area. I was also born deaf-blind. And when we went to the Oakland Unified School Districts, they told us, we don't have all the answers, we don't know the solutions, but let's try. Let's figure it out. And that's how it should be. In 2010, I entered Harvard Law School as their first deaf-blind student. And Harvard told me, we've never had a deaf-blind student before. And I told Harvard, I've never been to Harvard before. Harvard has an interesting history. Helen Keller was a famous deaf-blind advocate who lived from 1880 to 1986. She was brilliant, hardworking, and spent her whole life advocating. Harvard wouldn't admit her. Back then, Harvard was only for men. Helen's disability didn't hold her back. Her gender didn't hold her back. It was the community at Harvard that chose exclusion. Over time, the community at Harvard has changed, opening up to women, people of color, and people with disabilities. It's the community that chooses inclusion. It's up to the community, every single member, the students, the administrators, the faculty, to choose to practice inclusion. And when that happens, then a community is welcoming to diverse groups, women, people of color, and people with disabilities. So by the time I entered Harvard, it had gone through all these changes from Helen Keller's time to 2010. And even though they didn't have the solutions of how exactly a deaf-blind student would go through Harvard Law School, we sat down with the disability office and some of my professors and brainstormed what are the potential challenges and what are the potential solutions. And throughout my 3 years, we tried different solutions until we found systems that worked for us. That's inclusion. It's innovation. It's a desire to ensure that everyone feels welcome, even when you encounter the unknown. I want to give an example with a photo.
It appears on the screen.
We have President Obama standing at a table, and I'm standing on the other side of the table. And Obama's typing on a keyboard that outputs through Bluetooth onto a digital braille display, and I'm reading from the digital braille display. President Obama usually communicates with people through his voice, and we told him, I'm deaf-blind. The best way to communicate with me is through digital braille. President Obama has tons of staff. I had an interpreter with me. He could have said, oh, tell these other people to type. I'm not going to type. But he chose to practice inclusion. He chose to engage, even though it meant stepping outside his comfort zone, trying something new, he chose to step outside his comfort zone and practice inclusion. It's up to all of us to make those choices, to say, even if we don't know how exactly it's going to work, let's try, let's figure it out, and make things happen. Next slide. Communication happens many different ways.
She and a man use tactile sign
Through
language.
text, through voice. Another form of communication is sign language. Deaf communities all over the world have developed sign languages. The dominant one in the United States is American Sign Language. Deaf-blind communities are also innovative and have adaptive visual sign language to tactile sign language. So when I'm signing with someone, I feel their hand. I put my hand over their hand and feel what they're signing. And if a deaf-blind person is listening to me, they'll put their hand over my hand and feel what I'm signing. That's tactile sign language. Humans are innovative. We always come up with solutions to find ways to connect and communicate. And this video shows two people, me and a friend, using tactile sign language to communicate. Next slide. Another form of communication is dance. And dance
Haben dances smoothly with a partner.
often, stereotypically, is dependent on listening to music to interact and engage with music. Deaf individuals have found many different ways to engage with music. Some deaf dancers watch the fingers and hands of musicians and pick up the beat by watching them. They might watch the dancers and pick up the beat by watching dancers. Blind individuals will listen to the music if they can hear and engage with the music auditorily. For me, I can't hear the beat and I can't see the other dancers, so I had to think creatively and find solutions. When I was 16, I met a blind dancer who also teaches salsa and swing, and she showed me how to engage through touch. And salsa and swing are dances where by dancing with a partner, I can feel the music through the partner's hands. When I entered Harvard Law School, I knew they had an excellent Harvard ballroom dance team, and I approached the Disability Services Office and asked, can we make this accessible? What are the different ways that I can participate in the dance community? And we found that by pairing me with an advanced dancer, the dancer would mirror the instructor's movements, and I would learn the movements through touch. And when I had participated in the competitions, we would have an interpreter go out to the competitions with me to facilitate access to other information outside the dance floor. So if we're creative, we can find ways to make anything accessible. It's important to ensure access not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom too, for extracurricular activities, sports, clubs, field trips, study abroad. There are many different elements to an inclusive education. And it's up to all of us, every member of the Santa Cruz community, to ensure access. Next slide. A jungle gym is a fun way to symbolize access. A jungle gym has multiple ways to get up to the top. Here we have a photo with a jungle gym. It's pyramid-shaped, rope-based, and about 15 feet high. And I'm about halfway up the jungle gym climbing. There are many different ways to climb. You can climb by sight, looking at the ropes. You can climb by touch, feeling the ropes. You can climb by sound, having someone give descriptions of where to reach. If you have a mobility disability, you can build an assistive climbing device. There isn't a right or wrong way to climb. There isn't a right or wrong path to take. It's up to you to be innovative, and it's up to the community to say, yes, let's find all the different ways we can make this happen. Alternative ways of doing things are equal in value to mainstream ways of doing things. Right now, the big issue for many universities is ensuring digital information is accessible to everyone. Harvard and MIT have actually faced lawsuits for not having all their digital material accessible, in particular for having videos that didn't have captions. The lack of captions denies access to the deaf community. So when putting up learning materials on digital platforms, websites, apps, it's important to make sure that they're compatible with assistive technology that students with disabilities use, or faculty with disabilities, or staff members with disabilities. One element of digital access is screen readers, and we're going to show a quick video that gives an example of how screen readers work. A screen reader is a program that converts graphical information to speech or digital braille. The screen reader on the iPhone is called VoiceOver. VoiceOver also works on the Mac, iPad, and the Apple Watch. So when I'm using my phone, I use VoiceOver. VoiceOver can speak out loud and send information to the digital braille display.
News. Checking for news. National Geographic. Unread. World's largest rodents on lam from Toronto Zoo.
I'm panning right on the braille display using the advanced forward button. If I wanted to instead use hand gestures on the iPhone, I could flick right with one finger. To open an item, I can double tap anywhere on the screen.
Text size. Caption. Title. Title. World's large title. After escaping from the High Park Zoo in Canada, 2 capybaras have eluded capture by Jason Biddle. Published June 9. Most people do their best to avoid rodents of unusual size. But after a pair of capybaras escaped from Toronto's High Park Zoo on May alert. Gordon. Hi, I'm at the door. Sushi. Pot of food. Fish cake with swirl design.
Seated at a desk, Haben types on the keyboard of her digital braille display, a device about twice the size of a tablet.
My friend's at the door, so I'm just gonna let him know.
She runs her fingertips along the keyboard.
Close. Button. Reply. Button. Messages notification.
Haben's message appears in a small window beside a send button. The voiceover screen reader converts the text into synthesized speech.
Hang. In. There. I'm. Almost. Done. With. This. Demo. Send. Button.
VoiceOver has allowed me to access more information, news, mail, and messages. And it's also a way for me to know when friends are at the door. Thanks for watching. Bye. So that's an example of a screen reader, and it's also an example of an accessible app. The News app and the Messages app were designed with accessibility in mind. So the people building the app coded it to be compatible with screen readers. And those of you who use digital materials, upload materials to websites or apps, make sure you work with DRC and the IT department to make sure those are accessible to students with disabilities. Screen reader access is one aspect. Another aspect is captioning, ensuring that there's captions. Captions are text on the screen so that deaf individuals can access the audio content of the videos. Captions also help hearing students, hearing viewers. Maybe the room is too noisy. Maybe somebody wants to be able to access information without turning on the volume and disturbing other people around. So captions allow for greater access for a lot of people. It also makes it easier for people to find your videos. The more text associated with the video, the more likely it's going to pop up on searches. Another aspect is compatibility with assistive technology. braille displays like the one I use, or switch controls. Switch controls benefit individuals with mobility disabilities. So these are some of the things that currently exist. Keep innovating. You're at a university. This is where the innovation takes place. So think about more ways for people to engage and connect with the world. We've come a long way since Helen Keller's time, and we still have a long way to go. So these are the basics. Next slide. Plan for accessibility from the start. Imagine someone builds a skyscraper, realizes, oh no, there's no elevator, goes and tears down the skyscraper, adds in an elevator. That takes more resources and more time than planning for an elevator from the start. In everything we do, from digital information to planning our syllabi, it's important to plan for access from the start rather than trying to figure out access afterwards. The sooner you think about access, the easier it is for DRC to help you and make sure your class, your clubs, organizations are accessible to everyone. So plan from the start and engage with the disability community. DRC is available to help. San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind, National Association of the Deaf. There are a lot of disability groups that can help out and help think and innovate solutions to all different kinds of problems. There are also mailing lists that can help, whether you're a student or administrator or faculty member. Educate your community. Teach your colleagues the value of access. About 20% of our community is a person with disabilities. So you reach more people when you're inclusive. It's also legally required by law to be inclusive under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504. So do it for you. Do it to make your community stronger, to make your community welcoming. And because you deserve to live in a community with people like Helen Keller, Stephen Hawking, and Stevie Wonder. We're going to transition to discussion and questions and answers. I'm going to pull a chair out here and use the Braille display. Lisa will type questions, so you can raise your hand. We also have a microphone. Rick will help pass around a microphone, and you can ask your question. Lisa will type it, and I'll read on the Braille display.
Haben walks toward her chair. She pauses in front of her service dog, who still lies beside it. Lisa lifts the chair, and Haben takes a few steps backward. The dog, whose leash is tied to a chair leg, stands. Lisa carries the chair to the center of the stage. Haben disentangles the leash from around the dog's front leg, then goes over to pick the Braille display up off the desk. She sits down with it on her lap as Lisa sits behind the desk.
Okay, so anyone have a question right away? Took a little bit of time before oh yeah.
I'm sorry, introduce yourself. Jen Phillips. I work at ITS. And I just wanted to know how many of these presentations have you done and what were the different schools you visited?
Haben's fingertips move as she reads Braille from the display.
A lot. I've done many presentations. The last presentation I did was at a university in Chennai, the Indian Institute of Technology of Madras. Most of my presentations have been in the United States, but I've done a couple in India, Ethiopia, and China.
Haben, a slim young woman with long dark hair, faces the audience. Rick brings the microphone over to an audience member.
Hello, Haben. I had the pleasure of meeting you at Clinton Global and Creative University just last year, and you gave me really incredible advice then, and I just want to ask you the same question I asked you then, just so everybody else can hear the answer. For student spaces like student clubs here on campus, what are your top tips for students by students to make the space extremely inclusive for all students with disabilities. Thank you.
Rick walks briskly over and the woman hands the microphone to him.
One thing to do is write it down in your mission statement, in your club materials, saying we welcome students of all backgrounds, including students with disabilities. Some clubs are not accessible, and they say, well, we don't have any students with disabilities. But if you're inaccessible, of course students with disabilities aren't going to try to be part of your club. So if you put it in your materials that you're committed to being accessible, check in with DRC, maybe to get advice on what else you can do. Is your website accessible? Do you hold your club meetings in accessible places, physical access, where wheelchair users could attend? Do you plan to check in regarding audio access, like having interpreters? So start by including it in your mission statement.
So I'll ask my question. This is Rick asking. I'm wondering, Haben, what are some of the barriers you faced when you were at Lewis and Clark University, whether in the classroom or outside of the classroom?
An ASL interpreter signs on stage.
So one of the requirements at Lewis and Clark is to take a language. And it's hard for me to speak another language because it often requires being able to hear that language. So at the start of the semester, I met with the DRC, Lewis and Clark, and we talked about what are the potential solutions. And what we decided to do was to focus on reading and writing Spanish rather than speaking and hearing Spanish. Because writing and reading is something I could learn and practice and excel at that doesn't use one of my weaknesses, which is vision and hearing. So we were creative with lots of different things: theater, field trips, extracurricular activities. One of the barriers I encountered was actually outside the classroom. The cafeteria had a menu, would put the menu outside the cafeteria in print. Blind students can't read print. So at the start of the semester, I told the cafeteria manager, I'm not able to read this. Can you put it in Braille? He said, no. Braille takes too much time. It's too much work. We're too busy. Then I said, well, let's compromise. Send it to me as an email. You already print out the menu. You have it in digital format. All you have to do is copy and paste and email it to me. And they said, sure, but rarely sent it to me. So I'd go to the cafeteria, stressed, hungry, and would have no idea what they were serving. And I'd pick stations at random, get food, find a table, sit down, try the food, and there were some unhappy surprises. So after that, I decided I need to do something about this. And I talked to some of my friends. And my friends in the disability community reminded me, there's the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Access isn't a favor to do in your free time. Access is a civil right. So I went back to the cafeteria manager and framed the issue as a civil rights issue. And once I framed it as a civil rights issue, everything changed. They started making access a priority. And I finally had full access and could choose what I wanted to eat at the meals. The next year, a blind student came to the college, and he had immediate access to the cafeteria because of my advocacy. And that experience, learning about the power of the Americans with Disabilities Act, inspired me to study law, and I eventually went to law school.
A caption reads, Rick, any questions? Haben's service dog, a German shepherd, lies quietly behind her chair. The ASL interpreter continues to sign.
Hello, my name is Pam. I was curious about your service animal. and how you get your animal and how long you get to keep your animal. Thank you.
I got her about 7 years ago. She's from the Seeing Eye. It's the oldest guide dog school in the country, based in New Jersey. And before I decided to get a guide dog, I worked on my confidence and independent skills. I also use a cane and know how to use a cane. And once I was comfortable with that, I decided I'm comfortable and confident without a guide dog, but I love the added benefit of having a guide dog. And that's when I applied to guide dog school, the Seeing Eye, and got my dog, Maxine, and we've been working together for 7 years. Confidence comes from within. It shouldn't come from a dog. It shouldn't come from a computer. It's up to all of us to be our own advocates and be confident within ourselves. So Maxine and I have a good partnership. I help her and she helps me.
Hi, my name is Gwen Benner, and I work for the Division of Student Success for the Vice Provost as his analyst. You are so inspiring. This is amazing to hear your story. I wonder who inspired you, and I wondered what kind of mentors you had along the way. You could talk a little bit about that.
I wouldn't be where I am now without my mentors. I've had many different mentors. When I was in high school, I was part of an organization called Build On. And Build On encourages high school students to make an impact in their community and help build a school in a developing country. And my Build On program coordinator had never had a student with a disability participate in Build On and go on a trek for knowledge to help build a school in a different country. But she said, let's figure it out. We'll find a way. We'll make it work. And that philosophy, her attitude really had an amazing impact on me and my parents. And I went to build a school in Mali, West Africa, and I came back and taught other people about the value of making a difference in the world and believing in ourselves. Abby, the program coordinator from Build On, she doesn't have a disability, but she has a beautiful attitude. And she taught me to keep trying to find ways to make things work. And when I'm surrounded by people who share this philosophy, then I get to experience more. And the community in itself also benefits and experiences more.
A caption reads, Rick, other questions?
Hi, my name is Jay, and I'm wondering if you have a favorite website or other resource for faculty who want to learn more about how to make their courses accessible. Thank you.
Rick takes the microphone from Jay, a young man in the fourth row from the front.
That's an interesting question. I haven't heard of, I think for UC Santa Cruz, the best place to start would probably be DRC. And then think about the different elements of your classes. If you are in the sciences department, look at various resources for making science labs accessible to students with all sorts of disabilities. From blind students to deaf students to students with disabilities, to students with mobility disabilities. Same thing with art, music, environmental studies. So the solutions are going to be different for every department. So it's up to every faculty member to be creative and think, what can I do within my particular program? A program that's unique to me and with the skills I have to make it inclusive and welcoming to all students. So my message is, don't wait for someone else to give you the answer or to tell you to make it inclusive. Think about it for yourself and take responsibility for inclusion for yourself.
In front of the stage, a table holds an exhibit of accessible devices. Rick walks briskly across the hardwood floor to hand the microphone to a woman sitting in the second row from the front.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lorena, and I have a question about how do you manage going through all the student services departments, and what services could they provide to better assist students with disabilities, aside from just the DRC?
So it's a partnership between the disability office and the faculty. So I did sociology and anthropology at Lewis and Clark College. I also took computer science classes, theater classes, and classes in other departments. And with each professor, I would meet with them at the start of the class and say, what are your plans? What are the potential challenges and access issues? And we would brainstorm solutions. It would be different for every professor, depending on what they had in mind, but we made sure to develop a plan for each situation. So work in partnership with the DRC and with students.
A woman takes the microphone from Rick.
Hi, Haben. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Milagro, and I don't know, hearing you is just, it's a blessing to be here and listening to your story. And my question right now is, what were the challenges you faced growing up, I'm also Eritrean, and like, how did your parents accept this disability that you have? And what about now? Thank you so much.
Growing up was really hard because for most of our time growing up, in middle school and high school and even sometimes in college, the focus is on being cool and being normal. And those priorities are really harmful because it makes students who are different want to hide and suppress the ways they are different. So middle school, high school, those were really hard for me. Later, I started to find communities that weren't focused on being cool. They were focused on being true to themselves, being inclusive, forming communities on shared values. And that's when things start to feel good, start to feel safe. So think about celebrating all the different ways we're all different. And make sure the people around you feel comfortable expressing and sharing the ways that they're different.
A couple more questions, if there's more. I'd kind of like to get your opinion on something myself. Here at the DRC and at UCSC, we're talking about, the name of our office. Should it remain with disability in the name? We're talking about how do we reduce the barriers for students with disabilities, like having them come and meet with the professor. Is that a barrier in itself that other students aren't asked to do? So as we think about these things, the name of the office, Disability Resource Center, we've been encouraged by some people to consider changing the name. So let me go with that question first. Do you think we should consider changing our name, not including disability in the name?
For me personally, I like the word disability. And the reason I like the word is because alternative words like differently abled or special needs sound like they're tiptoeing around. It doesn't sound honest or authentic. It sounds really indirect. The other reason is the word disability is tied to civil rights. Americans with Disabilities Act, United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the word disability has a lot of power, a lot of history, and civil rights are tied to that word. So personally, I like using that word.
Okay, well, that's good enough for me. I'd like to. We'll talk to our students about that too. But, thank you for that. So then the other question is, we require students to deliver their letters to their professor, to have a meeting with the professor to talk about their accommodations. My philosophy has been sort of a student development, like helping students get their voice. But there's the other side, the argument that says, well, why should students have to do that much work? Why can't we just have students show up in class and they automatically have access, and instead of delivering a letter to the professor, their accommodations are just there for the professor. Can you talk about your feeling about the importance of that communication between the professor and the student?
Yes, and I think the responsibility should be more on the university than the students. So the university has more experience, more resources than the student. When I first entered college, I wasn't a very good advocate. It took me a while to learn how to advocate for myself. I think it's important for students to get self-advocacy workshops, maybe at the start of every semester, to have a self-advocacy workshop for students. But it shouldn't be a requirement that students have to advocate for themselves. Access, I feel it'd be easier for students for access to be automatic, for the professors to bear the responsibility to be inclusive. And DRC could provide support and guidance and information for professors and for students to help professors ensure that classes and programs are accessible.
Okay, that brings us to the end. Come forward and demonstrate universal design. You should face your audience. So there are liberators in the audience. They can see you too. So I want to first of all invite you to explore the exhibit that we have here. Several people worked very hard to put together, and remind you that Rosa is here to sign up students who are interested in the Accessibility Leadership Internship Program. And then finally, I would like to really give a warm UCSC thank you to Haben Girma for coming here and sharing her story and her insights into equal educational access. Thank you.